The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It bled through the cracked roof of the old repair shop, dripping into a rusty bucket that sang a slow, lonely rhythm. Inside, beneath the dim light of a single bulb, Daniel sat on the cold concrete floor, knees pulled to his chest, palms blackened with grease and regret. Life hadn't been kind lately. His father's old shop, once alive with laughter, old radios, and the smell of gasoline, was now nothing more than a memory wrapped in dust. He tried to keep it running after his father passed, but the bills came faster than the customers. He had lost his savings, his confidence, and nearly his will to keep going. And that night, when he looked around the emptiness of the place that once held his dreams, he whispered to himself that maybe it was time to close for good. But that was the night she walked in. A woman soaked to the bone, her trembling hands clutching the door frame. The sound of her soft voice cut through the storm and the silence like a blade wrapped in silk. She whispered, "I could use a strong hand," and didn't look away. Her eyes, tired yet unyielding, held a story that Daniel couldn't ignore. Something inside him, something buried under years of pain and failure, stirred awake. Before we go deeper into this story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of helping others when they least expect it, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. These stories come from hearts that still believe in hope. Her name was Clara. Daniel learned that as she stepped inside, shivering, her shoes leaving muddy imprints on the cracked floor. She looked fragile, like a page half burned, yet still clinging to the words written on it. Her car had broken down just outside town, and this was the only light she'd seen for miles. Daniel almost laughed. His was hardly a shop anymore, but instead he nodded and motioned her inside. He found himself grabbing an old towel, handing it to her, and clearing a space on the counter that had been buried under spare parts. For the first time in months, someone else was there. Someone who didn't just take something from him, but needed something from him. As Daniel worked on her car, he caught glimpses of her through the window. She stood under the awning, arms wrapped around herself, watching the rainfall. Every few seconds, her lips moved like she was whispering something to the night, but he couldn't hear it. It was as if she was talking to the rain itself, pleading, explaining, maybe even forgiving it. When he finally fixed the engine and started it, she smiled just faintly, but it was enough to light something in him. She reached into her purse to pay, but he shook his head. "It's fine," he muttered. She looked at him for a long quiet moment, then whispered again. "I could use a strong hand. Not just tonight." He didn't understand what she meant. Not then. But that night changed everything. Clara started visiting the shop often. At first, she said it was because her car just made a weird sound again or that she had nowhere else to wait out the rain. But Daniel could tell she came because she needed the silence he offered, the kind that didn't demand explanations, and he didn't mind. He needed her, too, though he didn't realize it yet. Over time, she'd bring him coffee in the mornings and sit quietly as he worked. He'd tell her about his father, how they built the shop from nothing, how he used to believe fixing things could fix people, too. And sometimes she'd tell him bits and pieces of her own life. A husband who used to hit her. A home she'd fled from. A family that stopped believing her. Every word she spoke carried weight. And Daniel listened like a man trying to learn a new language. The language of pain, unspoken. He never asked her for more than she gave. Never pushed her to explain why she stayed in that town with nothing but the clothes she came with. But one evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, she stood by the open garage door and said softly, Sometimes people break more than just things, Daniel, and not everything can be fixed with tools. Then she looked at him, her eyes wet, and added, "But maybe you can fix me anyway." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat in the same corner where he used to count his failures, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, he didn't think about what he'd lost. He thought about what he might save. Weeks passed. The shop slowly began to change. Clara helped him repaint the walls, dust off the counters, and organize old tools. She'd hum softly as she worked, sometimes laughing when her hands got covered in paint. Her laughter, fragile but real, filled the space that had long forgotten how to echo joy. Neighbors began to notice the lights were on again, and one by one, customers returned. The old place breathed again, but healing is never simple. One afternoon, Clara didn't show up. Daniel waited all day, pacing the floor, checking his phone, even though she never called him. When the sun went down, he drove to the bus station. Her bag sat on the bench, but she wasn't there. Panic settled deep in his chest. It wasn't until midnight that she walked back into the shop. Her face bruised, her eyes hollow. She didn't need to say anything. He already knew. Her past had found her. Daniel's hands shook as he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. She was trembling, whispering apologies as if she had done something wrong. "He found me," she said through broken breaths. "I thought I could run forever." Daniel's heart burned with anger, but he swallowed it. He couldn't change what had happened. All he could do was be the strong hand she once whispered for. For weeks after that, Clara barely spoke. She stayed in the small apartment above the shop, the one Daniel had once used as storage. He'd leave food by her door, never forcing her to come out, just waiting. And slowly she did. She began to walk around the shop again, fixing small things, sweeping floors, bringing him tea. One evening, as the sun painted the walls orange, she placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "You didn't ask for this, but you stayed anyway." He looked at her then, realizing how her eyes no longer looked for escape. They looked for home. The days turned into months. Together, they built more than a business. They built a rhythm, a quiet companionship that grew roots in their shared silences. Clara found strength in small things, painting, reading, even talking to customers. Daniel found purpose again in both her presence and his work. And for a while, it felt like maybe life had forgiven them both. But life, as it often does, tested them once more. One night, a storm returned, angrier than before. Daniel was closing the shop when he heard the tires screech outside. A car spun across the wet road, crashing into the ditch. He ran out and froze. The man inside was the same one from the photo Clara kept hidden in her purse. Her husband. He was bleeding, trapped behind the wheel, barely conscious. Daniel stood there, every instinct screaming to walk away. After everything that man had done to her, to them it would have been easy. But Clara's voice echoed in his mind. Sometimes people break more than just things. So he helped him. He pulled the man from the wreck, carried him into the shop, and called for help. When the ambulance took him away, Clara stood at the door, tears streaming down her face. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. That night when she whispered, "I could use a strong hand," she didn't mean someone to fight her battles. She meant someone strong enough to choose mercy when the world demanded hate. In the weeks that followed, Clara visited the hospital once, not to forgive him, not to forget, but to close the door for good. When she came back, she found Daniel by the same workbench where it all began. He looked at her and smiled faintly. "The shop's doing all right," he said. She nodded, stepped closer, and for the first time took his hand. "So am I," she whispered. The rain returned that evening, but this time it sounded different. Softer, almost like a song. Life didn't hand them miracles. They still struggled, argued, and carried scars. But they learned that sometimes a strong hand isn't one that builds walls. It's one that reaches out when everything else falls apart. Daniel never forgot the night she walked in drenched and trembling. And Clara never forgot the man who didn't look away. Years later, when people passed by the small auto shop at the corner of Willow Street, they often saw the two of them side by side covered in grease and laughter fixing broken things together. The old sign above the door still read Harris and Son, but someone had painted small letters beneath it, barely visible unless you stood close. It read, "And the ones we saved." Sometimes life doesn't give second chances, it gives people who are second chances. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe that kindness and courage can still change the course of a life, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us tell more stories that remind the world what love and compassion can do. Speech balloon special request. Comment below and tell us, what does a strong hand mean to you? Is it someone who saves or someone who simply stays? Because sometimes all it takes is one whisper, one act of quiet strength to turn a broken life into something whole again.